our friend from SiriusXM NBA Radio, also frequent contributor to shows like PTI and so many more on ESPN. Our friend Frank Isola back on the program. How you doing, Frank?
Good. Let me just make sure all the necessary windows are closed on my
Yes.
phone.
Mute.
If only that's the way that happened.
Got
happened
it.
in Luca's press
I could get caught
conference.
doing that too. I could get caught doing that too, so I better be careful.
What
How you
is-
doing?
I'm just paying rent in Luca's world is what I'm doing right now. So let's just jump right into a couple of headlines that have occurred in the last 24 hours outside of the world of the playoffs. Frank Vogel being bounced in Phoenix. What is Matt Ishbia up to, man? What's going on with the owner of the Phoenix Suns?
Yeah, the easiest thing to do is to say, or I should say the hardest thing to do is to say, you know what? We didn't really put this roster together the right way. We had Kevin Durant already with Devin Booker. Did we really need to go out and get Bradley Beal? Should we have tried to just fill out the roster with really good role players that could play both sides? No, they didn't do that. They decided, you know what? We'll just blame it on the coach. So Mike Budenholzer is a terrific coach who they're going to bring in, but they still have a lot of problems with that roster. And you look at Kevin Durant now, I think he's 6-15 in his last 21 playoff games. And Kevin Durant is still a great player, whether he's a superstar player that can carry you. I think the evidence now suggests that isn't true. So they got to do something with that roster more so than the coach. Frank Vogel's getting $31 million to walk away, but I think it was a mistake with what they did with the roster. It's easy to blame it on Frank Vogel.
Well, I mean, you bring in Frank Vogel, no matter how much of a pain in the you-know-what DeAndre Ayton can be, don't you hold on to him? I mean, isn't that the idea when you bring in somebody like Vogel, Frank?
I agree, and I also think too. You know, you look in the NBA with Steph now gone, out of the playoffs. LeBron, Anthony Davis, Giannis, Damian Lillard, Kevin Durant as well. It's all these younger guys. It still is a young man's sport. Certainly, you need experience. But with a guy like Bradley Beal, that's who they went all in on. And by the way, he has a no trade clause as well. You know, he's been hurt a lot. He really hasn't had a lot of success from a team standpoint in Washington. To me, the move never made sense. This idea of just going out now, you're trying to like build a fantasy team. It doesn't work like that. Look at what Minnesota has done. Look at what Boston did a few years ago when Brad Stevens made a move to go get Derek White. Now, the name's not going to blow you away. And now you look at what Derek White does. He shoots threes. He defends. That was a huge pickup. Derek White for Boston is a lot better than Bradley Beal for Phoenix.
Frank Isola here on the Rich Eisen Show. Also, just before we went on the air, $35,000 fine for Indiana Pacers head coach Rick Carlisle. This is straight out of the Phil Jackson playbook, right?
Yes.
Where you get ejected when you know the game's over to make your point, and then make your point verbally but calmly at the podium, get fined, but still affect the change in officiating that you're looking for. Do you think that's going to work, Frank?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think you're 100% right. It reminded me of kind of the 90's with Phil Jackson and Pat Riley, all the gamesmanship, the going back and forth. I think it was smart for Rick Carlisle to do it from this standpoint. He's not going to sit there at the podium and say, you know what, Miles Turner hasn't done enough. In fact, he's been kind of soft the first two games, and Tyrese Halliburton didn't do anything in game one. So what does he do? He turns it into, we're not getting calls. And really it all goes back to the kickball violation that was incorrectly called, and then they were upset about the moving screen on Miles Turner in game one. The game, game two, the officiating wasn't bad at all. It's just that they allowed the Knicks to get back in the game. The Knicks made shots. So Rick Carlisle sitting there, and he's playing to his audience, the whole idea of they're never going to let these small market teams win. So I've been in Indiana for playoff games against the Knicks. The crowd there is incredible. He's going to have everybody fired up. He knows that they need this game. No one's ever come back from a 3-0 deficit before in the playoffs, so he's trying to get everything working in his favor. And the biggest thing is that he's going to be facing a depleted Knicks team, but I think it was money well spent by Rick Carlisle. Take the pressure off of his team a little bit, put it on the referees, and get the fans involved, ready for a Friday night in Indianapolis.
Well, if Rick Carlisle was right, then speaking as a Knicks fan, Frank, what the hell happened in the finals against Houston and San Antonio, right? I mean, I'm doing the math. I'm looking up the population centers and what San Antonio is in the market meter rating compared to New York. You know what I mean? Like Josh Hart even said that we haven't won a chip in 51 years. What's he talking about? And
I've been at playoff games in places like Portland, and Utah, Indiana,
Sacramento at the Bells.
And it definitely is a thing where the fans of these teams think the league is out to get us. The league does not want us in the finals. But of course, look at a team like San Antonio, or a franchise like San Antonio, what they've been able to do. Look at Minnesota this year. what they're doing. So Rick Carlisle knows it's not true, and I think he knew he was going to get fined. But again, I think he's just doing it to rile up his fan base because they need. Yeah, I know the fans of Indiana are going to show up and they're going to be into it. The big question is going to be, will his team rebound, and what's Tyrese Halliburton going to do?
Frank Isola here on the Rich Eisen Show. The Knicks are calling Brunson's injury a sore foot, which is what happens after I play tennis. You know what I mean? That's what it's called. This doesn't seem like a sore foot. Like, what is the general sense of what ails Brunson right now, Frank?
And if last year against Miami, a lot of people didn't realize it, but he was playing with a really badly sprained ankle. But he kept playing, and his way of doing things, maybe this has something to do with growing up in an NBA household, and he certainly is going. He's not going to need the money, but he could certainly be a coach one day. He's never about making excuses. I have a funny feeling the injury is bad, not bad enough to keep him out from playing. He'll fight through it. Now, how much that impacts him this series, that's why you try to get these series over as quickly as you can. And these is a quick turnaround. It's a day off, then they're going to have to play Sunday afternoon. That's why the idea, and I know it came up at the shoot around today with the players about punting the game, which would be one way of giving Jalen Brunson a little bit more extra rest. But knowing his mentality, knowing Tom Thibodeau's mentality, they'll leave it up to Jalen. If Jalen Brunson feels like he can go, he'll be out there. If Jalen Brunson says, you know what, I don't think I'm up for it, they'll pull him out. I think they're going to leave it up to the player in this case.
Punting the game, meaning, as you said, because they're in an every other day cadence right now, because OG Anunoby's out. So I guess if we see Deuce McBride starting and Alec Burks get 40 minutes, then that's the version of punting. That's what you're saying.
And Rich, I keep referencing this game. In the 2001 conference finals, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, the series was tied at 1-1, and Allen Iverson was the MVP of the league that year, and he had taken a beating all year long, and he was hurting going into that game 3. He did not play game 3 on the road in the Eastern Conference Finals with the series tied 1-1. He came back for game 4, which tied the series at 2-2. Philadelphia ended up winning in game 7, so it's not the craziest thing. That's Larry Brown, old school coach like Tom Thibodeau. That's Allen Iverson, who was an MVP and as tough as any player you're going to find. And they felt, you know what, we got to give him a blow here. It's just, I don't know if he'll survive throughout the playoffs. And it ended up working. And again, that was with the series tied at 1-1. The Knicks have a little wiggle room, but I get it. You don't just feel like giving up games because this series could change pretty quickly.
Frank Isola here on the Rich Eisen Show, and you, because I follow you at the Frank Isola on Twitter. You're in the midst of the conversation nonstop about the Tom Thibodeau minutes debate and how he just, there's no load management with him. And he throws his guys out there. And Josh Hart's played 48 in 4 games in the playoffs already, and so on and so forth. Is it fair, though, to say that what we're seeing with Brunson and Anunoby and all the other stuff, is this potentially that coming home to roost? Or the Knicks are now going to be excellently equipped for having a short-handed situation because they're used to playing so many minutes? What's your 2 cents on that, Frank?
All right. Number one, their best player, I think, was 13th in the league in minutes. Behind guys like Kevin Durant, it was a history of injury problems. Guys like that. And, look at the playoffs this year. Kawhi Leonard got hurt. Nobody's blaming Ty Lue for it. Luka Doncic seems to be struggling. Nobody's blaming Jason Kidd for it. So in the case of Josh Hart, if you go back, especially to the Philadelphia series, and even in these first 2 games here, with all the minutes that are being played, which team looks like they're the freshest in the fourth quarter? Which team looks like they have an extra bounce to their step? And I think the biggest issue that the Knicks have right now is that he's basically playing his backups. Because Julius Randle had the injury when, who was it? Jaime Jaquez, I think, took the charge and he messed up his shoulder. Obviously, Mitchell Robinson has been dealing with injuries the past 2 years. And the OG Anunoby one hurts, but if you look at OG's career as well, if you go back to 2019, when he was on Toronto, he did not play in the finals because he was coming back from injury. So he has a history there. So I'm not worried about guys like Josh Hart because he seems to be durable enough to do it. But the other thing is they're kind of running out of options at this point. They could try some of the guys on the bench and see if it works. And maybe that's why you completely punt the game. Don't even play Josh Hart tonight. Don't even play Dante DiVincenzo. Make it like a tryout. See all these other guys that never play and see maybe who can become the 6th, 7th, or 8th man down the road. But I'm not buying the minutes thing because it happens. There's a lot of players, all over the NBA. Look at Jamal Murray right now. He's dealing with an injury as well, and he missed a lot of time this year. So I don't necessarily think minutes contributed contribute to guys necessarily always getting hurt.
So, Frank, what's your opinion on the name Michael Jordan being bandied about for Anthony Edwards as much as we're hearing right now?
It's so a couple of months ago he came to Brooklyn, Anthony Edwards did.
Mm-hmm.
And when I watch him play, and I said this on the radio show that Monday morning, I said, I'm not saying he's Michael Jordan, but his mannerisms and the way that he plays remind me. The little fadeaway jumper that he has, his movement, going to the basket. What you love about Anthony Edwards, and you could tell that his teammates love him, he always gives his teammates credit. He doesn't really like hearing that comparison. And you talk about minutes. The guy goes out and he plays like Michael Jordan did. He plays all the time. And he tries to play both ends of the court. And he also has a bit of a killer instinct because right now, that team is 6-0, and that's 6-0 with 4 road wins, I should say. Beating Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, and now Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, and the defending champs. So he's got a little bit of that killer instinct for a young player. I think when you look at him play, the body movement, that definitely reminds me of Michael Jordan.
Yeah, because you also have to have many other things to be compared to Jordan. You have to have one of the best defensive games, period, that ever. Not just in the game today, like ever. You also have to have that stone cold killer mentality, not just in the game today, just like ever. And you also have to hold, your teammates or not be afraid to hold them to account. And just seeing him sitting next to Karl-Anthony Towns the other day, we had Carl on the show yesterday, and I even asked him, like, how'd you take it? When he basically told Karl-Anthony Towns in front of the whole media, stop effing fouling. You're kind of screwing it up when you're not on the floor. And that is what reminded me of Jordan.
You're 100% right. And I also think, you mentioned the thing with Jordan holding teammates accountable. Jordan also put confidence in his teammates. And I thought about it when Jalen Brunson made that pass to Josh Hart in Game 6 against Philadelphia, where in that moment, the better decision was passing it to an open teammate. We've seen LeBron do that before, and he actually has gotten criticized for it. And Michael Jordan did a lot in his career. John Paxson was responsible for a big shot in the final. Steve Kerr, even on Michael Jordan's 55-point game at Madison Square Garden, he passed at the end when he was double and triple teamed, and Bill Wennington got a dunk out of it. So those are all the qualities that you need to be a great player. It's not just about shooting a fadeaway jumper, a contested three with 2 guys on you. It's about making the play. Good for Karl-Anthony Towns. I'm happy for him. My wife and kids got invited to his Sweet 16 birthday party. Obviously, that was a while ago. And I was invited too, but I had a Knick game that night. How dumb am I? I should have gone to the party.
Yeah.
I should have become his agent for crying out loud.
He's a good kid. I like him when he calls in or zooms in. It's just been fun when he's done it. The starting lineup on SiriusXM NBA channel, Monday through Friday, 7 to 10 a.m. Frank Isola here on the Rich Eisen Show. A couple of minutes left here. So I know it's a simple thing to say, got to make your shots. If you don't make your shots, you're not going to win. That's an easy thing to say about anybody in the NBA, but the Celtics in particular, it's just if they don't make their threes, it seems like they're toast, and then you sprinkle in the turnover problems that they seem to have every now and then in the playoffs. And it looks like we saw that last night in Game 2. What's your opinion of the Celtics right now, Frank?
Yeah, I don't like the way that they play, with always trying to make so many 3-pointers. To me, they always have a size advantage. Why not, try to find a mismatch where you have it, whether it's Drew Holiday with Darius Garland trying to guard him or Jason Tatum. I'm not saying you have to do it every possession, but just stick those guys down in the post. Now, Brian Scalabrine, who I do the show with in the morning, he says they were trying to hunt for that, but he says it takes them too long to get into their offense. I thought they looked really soft last night, just like they look soft in Game 2 against Miami. And I think that's the one edge if we ever saw a Knicks-Celtics series. Now, the Knicks, who knows how many players they would have available, but the Knicks are tough, both mentally and physically. I'm not so sure we've seen that yet from the Boston Celtics. And after the game, Jason Tatum comes out and says, everyone thinks we're supposed to blow everyone out by 20, 30 points. No, we don't. But we're expecting to see a better performance and maybe play with a little bit of fight. And they certainly didn't have it last night. So it's the second series in a row where they dropped that home game. And what's that crazy stat? Their last 30 home playoff games over the last 4 years, they're 15-15. It's hard to think of them as a championship team if they're going to be 15-15 at home when it really counts.
Yeah, I hear you. I just, when Porzingis gets back in there, right, Frank, and we're assuming he's gonna soon, and I don't know, they just seem to be so talented, and we're kind of having tongue-in-cheek fun here that if they do take on New York, it'll be the Knickerbockers, because Brunson on half a leg and Josh Hart with an IV bag and the ghost of Allen Houston needing to come off the bench. I don't know, man.
But
Celtics do.
But Rich,
yes.
if you go back to '99 and Jalen's dad was on the bench, he was at the end of the bench, but he was on the bench, and Tom Thibodeau was an assistant coach with that Knicks team in '99. Patrick got hurt. I think that was game 2 against Indiana in the conference final, so he was done for the rest of the playoffs. Then if you go back to that game 6, Allen Houston, that was the game where the Knicks clinched. Larry Johnson got hurt in the first half. He was done. So the Knicks were missing former number 1 overall Patrick Ewing, former number 1 overall Larry Johnson. They were just going to Allen Houston the whole time. That's why I got to laugh a little bit with all the Reggie Miller, over the top stuff. Reggie Miller could not stop Allen Houston. I know they don't bring that up when they talk about Reggie Miller, dominating Madison Square Garden, owning the Knicks, owning Madison Square Garden.
Yes.
They don't bring up game 6 in '99. I could tell you that.
Well, they yada 99 in the broadcast the other night and then just stuck on the other one,
I like that.
Listen, I'm all for talking about iconic moments in Madison Square Garden, and it just feels like we're seeing it again, man. It just does feel like it, Frank. Right?
I agree. That's why I'd like to see my boy Charles Oakley there. I know, there's been a nasty falling out, but we're seeing all these other Knicks sitting there, some of whom never even won a playoff game, much less a playoff series, and it's the 30th anniversary.
Yeah, so I saw you mention that. So where are we on that? I know that's the third rail.
I don't think it's good. I talk to Charles a lot. Charles loves talking basketball, and he's excited about this team because he likes the way that they play. And I think this, Rich. Every time the Knicks have a good team, and back in 2013 they had one, and right away, the 90's Knicks. And I know people are going to roll their eyes. What do you care about the 90's Knicks? You guys never won anyway. That's what they'll say to the fans. But there was something about that team that resonated with New Yorkers, how hard they played, diving for loose balls. And I think this team has a little bit to them. They don't get caught up in all the nonsense. It's not a lot of the it's just going out there, playing hard, and they clearly take their cues from their point guard, who's just a no-nonsense player who plays for a no-nonsense coach. And it's all about winning, because ultimately that's all the fans really want, and that's what you're getting now in New York.
Well, every time I hear people, the 90 Knicks didn't win anything, it's like the 90's Knicks were like everybody else in the Jordan era. They were like Drexler, they were Charles Barkley, they were Karl Malone and John Stockton.
You're right.
They were everybody else. Name it. The Pacers, the bad boy Pistons after the Bulls finally got past them. The Knicks were just like everybody else, where they could have been champions at another time. And unfortunately, when Jordan finally did have to depart the scene, there is Hakeem Olajuwon saying, "It's my time." I get it. I understand. But it was a time where, after the doldrums of the 80s hit, and Bernard King was kind of the only bright spot outside of getting Ewing's envelope chosen out of the, lottery machine, whether it was frozen or not. This made it feel like it's back. The feeling is back. And I kind of feel that way right now. And speaking as somebody that swore off the team because of Oakley, because of what happened to him, Brunson's pulled me back in, man. He has totally pulled me back in, Frank. 100%.
And he's got that DNA in him from those 90 Knicks, obviously from his father and from Tom Thibodeau. And, he kind of knows, he has an idea of what it could be like there and what's expected. I'm glad you brought up Michael Jordan. They should have had him on the telecast for the last game, because that's the guy that did own the Knicks, because the Knicks can never beat Michael Jordan. Reggie Miller, they were 3-3 against. And at Madison Square Garden, I love Reggie Miller. I'm not trying to kill Reggie Miller.
Right.
But he was 6-12 in playoff games at Madison Square Garden. So let's slow it down.
Or he was 6 for 12 in the last 10 seconds of that one game. You know what I mean? That's the way it felt. That's the way it felt, Game
7 in '94, he also shot an air ball with 24 seconds left. I love the guy. I'm just trying to,
by the way,
he's not Michael Jordan.
I love the guy, but let me kill him. No, I'm just kidding. Frank, thanks for the time. We'll do this again soon. Thanks again, brother.
Thanks, Rich. Say hello to your boy Larry David for me.
I will do that. You got it. Thank you. Frank Isola, everybody, right here. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.